Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, Turnstiles to Touchdowns, Audio Solutions for Facility-Wide Engagement. I'm Andy Berg, Executive Editor for Athletic Business Magazine. Thank you for joining us today, as well as thanks to Biamp for sponsoring today's discussion. I think what we have planned for you today will be incredibly helpful if you're considering a new audio system for your facility. When we think about audio, we're usually thinking about good music, the announcer's call during game day. But interestingly enough, that audio experience can enhance your entire community's experience of your facility well beyond game day, if you do it right. And Dave Howden, Technical Services Manager for Biamp's Loudspeaker Solutions Group, has some expert advice on how you can do just that. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that you can ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can, either during Dave's presentation or at the end. Dave, why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you very much, Andy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Dave Howden. I'm Technical Services Manager of Biamp's Loudspeaker Solutions Group. We are a dedicated team that specializes in providing, design and application support to our sales channels. I've been working in the same location for 27 years, with either Biamp or community, and uh, seen a lot of different implementations of systems in indoor and outdoor sporting types of venues. Um, yeah, myself and my team of designers. There's probably not an application we have not seen or have not addressed in the past, from the smallest of schools, little league fields, all the way up through professional sporting venues worldwide. So uh, we are quite adept at overcoming challenges and providing very good guidance, to our customers to ensure successful outcomes for your systems. Let's see what else we have here. A lot of my experience that I'm drawing on here is not just, from the manufacturer side. I've spent the last 28 years mixing audio in a wide range of sports facilities. And when I say mixing, I'm mixing for the in-stadium show, not the broadcast side of it. So a lot of what I'm going to be relaying today is really based on coming up on 3 decades of experience of actually operating these systems. Uh, I generally work in 4 venues across the Philadelphia area, supporting a number of teams currently, NFL, MLB, MLS, and a Division I college. And I also, spent the better part of a decade supporting NBA and NHL size shows. So a lot of dynamics, in these large venues, but everything we're going to talk about today is really scalable to most any size venue. Yes, the large professional venues and, have, generally very, very large budgets, but you don't need a huge budget, to, you know, create, an environment where fans, can feel, connected to the event. Um, we can, augment and monetize these various audio, video, and lighting systems on our path to creating an immersive environment. But these immersive environments don't happen by accident. Just adding a bunch of speakers to your venue doesn't automatically give you an immersive environment. The use and leveraging of AV systems with compelling and appropriate, for the moment content, from the time the doors open and people start walking in to the time the event concludes and people are walking out, is key to an immersive experience. The sound aspect is generally, the most flexible and impactful part of the equation. There's facilities that have, large, video systems, and we have LED boards and a lot of signage, and those folks that already have that installed, they're probably well on their way to, achieving that immersive experience and immersive environment. But even, as I said, smaller venues, benefit from these systems if you leverage them and use them in the right way. We want to keep, the fans engaged. We want to keep the fans excited. Uh, as appropriate for the facility type, having the proper event entertainment planning, scripting, and game day execution of what we generally call, the show, uh, for our fans is key to immersive engagement. These systems can be used to enhance and extend the excitement of moments of our sporting teams, along with reinforcing the branding of them. Consistency of the show execution is really, is really key to engaging fans, and is greatly desirable to have, a repeatable show depending on how many different athletic teams, you may be supporting, in your facility. We got to look at all the different elements, that we can use to create this immersive environment. We've got anything from cheer squads to bands to DJs, mascots, maybe even MCs in the stands, all connecting fans to the event which we are presenting. But let's not lose sight of the fact that they are there for the sport. So let's not get in the way of letting the sport happen, at the same time. But, taking inventory of all the elements that you have available to build an immersive experience is really, one of the first steps. Uh, Sports events are very dynamic. You can't, you can only plan out so much. You kind of know, when they're, when we're going to start, when there's an intermission or a halftime or, or what have you. And we try and plan our, to, strategically engage at key points, during these events, whether it's in event or at an intermission, commercial break, media timeout, what have you. A lot of these things, happen as they do, and they ebb and flow and shift in time. So we need to remain flexible and agile when creating these environments, and how we use the various elements that we have available to us, and how we fan those elements out across, our various audio systems within the facilities. So creating an immersive audio experience that extends beyond the playing surface, whether it's indoors or outdoors, leads to a higher level of patron engagement in your facility. Whether you are in charge of a high school program, a higher education program, maybe you're a private sports venue, or a public venue that rents itself out and doesn't necessarily have a home team. Expanding your audio communication reach is highly beneficial on many levels. Even by simply extending the audio into adjacent ingress egress paths, be it outside the gym or the pool or the ice rink, or whatever sort of facility you may have. This helps provide ongoing opportunities to connect with your patrons. Sports venue systems, which are typically not within the sight lines of the actual playing surface, are often referred to as back of house systems. These systems support fan engagement when they're out of view of the event. Larger facilities, sometimes these systems can also be integrated with a video aspect if you have a video show that you're producing, which you want to, make sure that you have audio and video properly synchronized in these back of house systems, which makes it a lot easier to keep people's attention if what they're seeing and what they're hearing are actually, in sync with each other. But this is something to work through with your contractor and commissioning person. We'll discuss that a little bit more later on. Again, depending on the facility, there's often areas available to game day staff, or just your normal working staff, perhaps the press. officials, referees, and such that also benefit from clear sound reproduction when they are out of view of the playing surface during some or part of the event. So let's keep the important folks that really make the event work. Let's keep connected to them and keep them informed as appropriate. We talk primarily about game days, sporting events here, but let's not forget all the other non-game day activities that might happen in a facility and that might be able to be monetized when you have these expanded systems. Um, Sound systems can often be tasked to support non-game day activities such as strength and conditioning programs, facility rentals, recruiting activities, or team preparation. With proper planning, these systems can also provide increased functional facility space, where there is a need for delivering clear audio, whether it's via microphone or some sort of playback that you're doing. So really helps bring spaces that may be underutilized, that are out of view of the main playing field, and turn them to a functional space which you can use for other possibly day-to-day or not day-to-day activities. Common public areas, such as ticketing booths and entrances and concession areas. These things that are all, very much wrapped up in a sporting event. All benefit from sound systems and lead to increased engagement. Anywhere within, the ticketed areas of a facility, it's certainly desirable to be able to have communication with our patrons. But certainly, consider at the very least, consider your ingress and egress areas first, since that's where we're often going to have the highest concentrations of people. These speaker systems, we're not talking huge systems. We're not talking the large ones that generally cover the main stadium, seating areas. These are often smaller speaker systems we're talking about implementing here and attaching, in these areas. They're usually speakers you can hold in one hand. They're not these, 100-pound Goliaths, because they don't need to be. We're generally trying to project sound relatively short distances and at moderate sound levels. We have many options for indoor and outdoor speakers with Biamp. Um, and we can accommodate speakers, whether it needs to go on a wall, needs to hang from overhead, or needs to go on a pole. We have most all of these solutions well covered, and a wide variety of options available for them. Having the ability to disseminate information in real time to all or to targeted patron areas is highly beneficial in any large facility, but especially so in sporting facilities. And clear sound isn't just loud; it also needs to be intelligible. Uh, touch on that here and there as I go through this, but you need to be able to understand what's coming out of the speaker. And there's a lot of things that can affect that, from the ambient noise, in the area, to the acoustics of a space, sound bouncing around rooms. So, we take great care, when we're providing design support, to provide appropriate systems, for these various areas. We can also, tie in, building or campus-wide, larger paging systems into these sport systems, with proper planning. Well, these aren't really considered, they're not considered, a life safety system, by the rule book and all the regulations that go with them. They do provide an effective means to clearly communicate with your patrons for a wide range of things, many listed on the screen here. So the ability to communicate clearly, certainly key. Control of these systems. Biamp has a lot of easy to use controllers which may be programmed for a wide range of functions. We pride ourselves in producing, human controls that don't require a degree in engineering or a full day training to effectively make use of them. We have anything available from a highly customizable graphical user interfaces, such as, some of them shown on the screen here, that with a touch of a button, we can reconfigure the sound system to meet the needs of the event at the moment.
So Dave, just to clarify there, so you don't need like an audio mixer with 1,000 knobs and buttons on it. I can do everything right from those control systems.
Very often, yes. With proper planning, I say for smaller facilities, I smaller facilities usually don't have, game day audio engineers like do when we get into the collegiate worlds and places like
Sure.
that. And if you have just, a few sources, maybe, we of course have our PA announcer. We may have a microphone for the anthem, or maybe the band plays it. And we may have a music source that we play during walk-in, or walk-out or halftime. Larger, those sorts of shows often can be accommodated, with these very simple control systems that are, configured by the contractor during the commissioning phase. Larger productions, of course, that have, audio from various videos, video sources. Maybe there's microphones, for the band in a collegiate type
Sure.
environment. When you get into that level of sophistication, yeah, we probably need to and have an audio engineer on the show. But for many smaller facilities, these simple, easy to use, intuitive, you know, whether they be wall mounted or desk mounted interfaces, they'll get the job done for you.
Sure. All right.
So say simple and effective volume, source selection, or system reconfiguration at the press of a button. We all like an easy button. It's not always that easy, but it certainly can be with proper commissioning and planning. Uh, we're able to add security measures to these various touch screens and stuff to keep curious hands, at bay. So you don't have somebody reconfiguring a system mid-event. We also have means and methods within the BIAMP ecosystem of products to remotely monitor and control these systems. Also, in case you don't have a qualified person on site. If we've got network access to a system, we could certainly control it from the other side of the campus to turn it on for some sort of event or power it back down. So there's a lot of options available there, and during the planning phases, you really need to think about, okay, the operation of the system. We can get the system in there, but let's make sure we have an easy way to operate it. All right. So engagement. Parking areas are usually your first opportunity to engage with patrons. You've got a couple plus minutes while they're walking from their vehicle, approaching the gates or the ticket windows to set the tone of the event. Announce, information, through some sort of, playback means, or many other uses, to get information, you know, to the patrons. So we want to start early. We want to engage often. Uh, we have numerous other uses for these systems, possibly on non-game days, depending on the facility type. Say, when properly planned, these systems can additionally, provide local inputs for microphones and playback, in addition to connectivity to the main sound system. Especially if you're having some sort of event or a function where it would make sense to have voice reinforcement in those areas, game days or non-game days. But let's remember, for any of these systems outdoors, let's make sure we're being a good neighbor in densely populated areas. Let's do our best not to let sound bleed into unintended areas, into whether it be neighborhoods or other parts of a campus or regions, around a venue. So just be a good neighbor. We want to monitor these volumes, even if you got send somebody out to say, okay, how loud is it? Is it too loud? Is it not loud enough? Little quality control on game days goes a really long way. The ticket booth or entry area is more often than not the first point of contact with the patrons. And at that point, especially if we have a queue to get in, we have a captive audience. So that is valuable time, again, that can, potentially, be monetized through the playback of advertising, messaging, promotion of upcoming events can also just give you, the information that that you need right now. What time do the gates open? Um, a wide range of messaging can be useful and can help get fans in faster by getting them ready for whatever security processes and procedures you have in place. They're not wondering they're not wondering when they come up to the door, can they bring their cooler in? Can they bring a bag of sandwiches? Can their kids, bring their pirate booty bags in? We can answer a lot of those questions before they're, actually approaching the gates and having tickets checked. So yeah, bag sizes, food, water, restrictions. Once an event starts, these systems may continue to play a welcome message until most patrons are inside, and then they might be switched over, through a simple touch of a button to the stadium programming for those late arrivers, so we can engage them and get them enveloped in the event, as soon as they're within earshot of the speaker system. For egress or end of an event, a different message, or promotions, might be played on these speakers. Pretty much everybody's going to pass through the gates going in. They're going to pass through the gates going out, which is why I emphasized earlier that the ingress and egress areas of facilities, very beneficial to have systems there. I mean, someone has to someone has to create this content. They do have to record it, but there's simple computer programs and schedulers that can do that.
Sure, yeah. And those messages you're talking about, are they hard to like say create, record them, update them? Can you update them during the event? Is that a laborious process?
It typically isn't. You know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before people started doing, their podcasts and webcasts and such, um, capturing audio or audio plus video content, wasn't particularly easy. But in recent years, with so many people taken to, their podcasts and webcasts, a lot of people, and probably somebody within your organization and if not in your department, can, you know, we could come up with a script for them, have them talk it into a computer while it's recording, and then take that, anywhere from 30-second to 2-minute or whatever the message may be, depending on the information that it's providing, and put it on the network and have it play back, through these gate areas or any other areas of interest. So the technology is well at hand. It's evolved. It's easy to use. We just need, somebody to do it. Some facilities, choose to just do it all at once. We know what our game schedule is for the year for this particular team. So let's have somebody record a welcome message, welcome to the home team, versus the visitor. Gate time is, 7 p.m., this, et cetera, et cetera. And they could also, at the same time, you record a walkout message for that event. And maybe you could have somebody knock out, 10 events, in
Sure.
in one sitting. And then you have those, and somebody on staff does need to manage it and make sure that the right messages are played for the right event. But it's really not hard to create this content and actually get it to come out speakers into public areas anymore.
Sure. Sure. All right.
So ticket windows in large venues are also another, opportunity to, engage with our fans and, connect them with sound, whether it's pre-recorded messaging, advertising upcoming events, or it's, the live announcer from the event, currently happening in the building. Uh, lot of a lot of flexibility you have in these, but let's keep our fans engaged as long as we can, while they're near our facility. And again, keeping these things at moderate audio levels, or appropriate levels, as I like to call them, is key. What really makes you know what really makes this work is a centralized audio control system. um, with, as I've shown, perhaps, remote volume controls with the predefined event presets. There could be a walk-in preset, there can be an in-game preset, there could be a halftime preset, and there could be a walkout preset. And in a properly designed and thought through system, these single button pushes can trigger a whole lot of things, within the Biamp ecosystem, routing audio, routing playback devices, at the appropriate time to maintain that fan engagement, again, from doors open to doors closed. We want to engage with them and immerse them, in our show. Um, let's make sure that we have appropriate protections in place in case of unexpected loud signals. It's not going to let speakers get too loud, but also not too quiet, for the function of those areas.
Sure. And like, it seems like every one of these spaces will be different and maybe have buildings over here or no buildings at all. How do you quantify for the volume level at a particular venue?
So it's having the right volume level, not too loud, not too quiet. Takes a little bit of, bit of footwork up front, but usually during the commissioning process, with the installing contractor, we'll, we'll go through and level match systems to, ensure that we have even sound coverage. We can set devices, in the electronics to limit the volume of those areas. But what we need to do is usually have the sound from our speakers at whatever point you want to observe it be about 10 decibels louder than the ambient noise. That ambient noise, could be, the people inside of a concourse, or maybe you're next to a noisy road. Um, just need to have an appropriate amount of level, and it's I have targets that I aim for in facilities. For back of house systems, I usually aim for about 85 decibels, in the voice range. And this is easy to quantify for people that aren't audio experts. I mean, most, Apple and Android devices these days have, freeware or built-in programs that'll give you a pretty good estimate of, what the sound pressure level is. And if there's a number that I was aiming for in back of house, it's usually in that 80 to 85 decibel range, assuming that that level provides enough margin above the background noise that's already there. One of these areas that is challenging are concourses in larger venues, especially enclosed concourses. They're often very loud, already, when they're filled with patrons, and they require higher density speaker coverage, not for louder, but so that we can provide a more even sound field as they, you know, transgress, across these areas, whether they're going to concessions or just finding their way, to their seats. Um, these spaces are often, very, what can I say, they're echoey. When when they're very empty, yeah, they sound really tough. A lot of sound bouncing around, but they actually get better when we add people to them, because people, our bodies, we absorb sound. If you're doing a cold weather event, you start, whether it's, hockey or football or something like that, depending on your climate. People in jackets, hey, they help a whole lot in these spaces. While they're making their way to their seats or whatever part of the venue they might be. So special care in designing concourses to ensure that we have intelligible sound. As an extension of those concourses, we usually have the restrooms also, which sound equally as bad, but not a bad place to drop a single speaker at a moderate level. Again, trying to keep fans engaged with the event, no matter what's happening in the event, no matter where they are in the venue.
Sure. Um, and so what kind of messaging are you delivering within the concourse?
Depending on, the different, depending on what you have available to you, concourses, during a sporting event, if you have a webcast or a radio broadcast, you might consider sending that program source to concourse areas to keep fans engaged. For simpler productions, maybe it is just the PA announcer and, well, if it's football, maybe the referee mics, to keep people engaged to that. So in game, that's usually where we're leaning. Pre-game and post-game, probably just playing the same music that I'm playing to the main system or the bowl system, as I generically refer to them as. But something we need to be mindful of, in all these venues when we're projecting sound into concourses and adjacent areas to the playing surface is let's be very aware of them, overlapping each other. Um, I know, some sports are particularly sensitive to, if you've got a radio broadcast going on in a concourse, well, the referees and umpires certainly don't want it to be so loud, echoing through the entrances to the main seating area that they can hear it. So let's try and keep a division, between those areas, whether it be the bowl or the concourse, especially if they have just different sources going to them during an event. So don't let the playing sources hear the concourse. That's sort of what I see most in the facilities that I've worked in. Concourses open to the outside are generally easier to address acoustically, but now we have that problem with bleed possibly into the seating area. If you've got a radio broadcast, a web broadcast, or some different program material happening in that area during an event, um, concourses that are open to the outside, they can, present some different challenges as to containing that sound. It's really about sound containment. I mean, we try to contain sound to our main seating areas, whether it's an indoor or an outdoor facility. Let's make sure we're doing that with these auxiliary areas around our facilities also. Outdoor concourses, acoustically they're easier, usually not as reflective, easier to provide clear audio with a minimum number of speakers, but now we require weather resistant speakers for outdoors. um, Luckily for you, viewing this, I mean, Biamp is the world leader in outdoor speakers from small to the very large. And we have a lot of different ways to implement these speaker solutions to ensure intelligibility for indoor and outdoor concourses, whether they're mounted to walls or mounted overhead or, whatever facilities are available for mounting of them. One of the most popular areas of a venue, outside of the playing surface is the concession area. We want to maintain engagement with our patrons and the ability to, communicate with them. Again, volume levels are important. We don't want, if we have speakers at a concession area or projecting towards a concession area, let's make sure that it's not so loud that it's interfering with point of sale operations. We're here to do a business transaction. Let's not make it hard for the folks in the concession areas to do their business and get to the next person and let people get back to their seats. Most of the time, concession areas, uh, let's say we'll split this up a little bit here. For smaller schools, for your high schools and smaller sports operations, we're usually just placing the stadium audio. The concession areas very often are within earshot of the main system, if it's in an end zone or in the corner of the room, maybe in a basketball type area, arena. Sometimes they might not even need additional reinforcement. For those concession areas that are maybe behind the seating, they're on the concourse or behind the bleacher seats of an outdoor stadium. First choice is usually, stadium PA. That's what they want to hear. They want to stay in touch with the game that they were just watching. Now they're walking away. Yeah, you might have the option, like on concourses, depending on what's available from your facility to have, a radio or a streaming broadcast in these areas. It's important to, as I've alluded to ensure audio program levels are not excessively loud. Avoid interfering with patron, point of sale, or at the entry point. Let's not interfere with people, taking tickets or perhaps doing bag checks or something like that. Uh, we want to make sure we have good, clear, and intelligible speech. But just loud does not mean it's clear. It can also be distracting. And as I said, we usually need to be a little bit louder than the background ambient noise. And let's try not to bleed sound into areas that's not intended or not within the scope of the event. Locker room systems, have certainly evolved, and there's much easier ways to, help the athletes get, hyped up, and excited, pre-game while they're getting ready. Uh, these are essentially local entertainment systems, and they can play a very important part in setting, the team's mood for the game. They can also be useful if you route audio to them, during the game, so that perhaps support staff waiting in the locker room for the team at halftime or intermission or whatever it may be can, know exactly, when the team's coming in. Yeah, you're always going to have a couple people out on the court that can, run in and say, yeah, here's how much time is left. But being able to communicate, facility wide with these folks is also important, so they can be aware of timing and other things happening. And we want to keep it simple. Locker room systems are similar. Very often, something as simple as somebody, you know, whether it's, a staff member or a player being able to just Bluetooth into a system and play the playlist that they agreed on, for that day, or maybe some sort of a web radio or streaming service, selectable again, very simple, touchpad and maybe a very simple volume control to keep things managed. You know, but yeah, whatever the sport, athletes love their music, and extending your ability to play and into and address these areas from your central control point can be extremely beneficial. And don't forget the hallways outside of locker rooms, where the teams are lining up, ready to, whether it's run on the court or run onto the field or whatever it may be. Having systems in those areas can help get the team hyped up for their big run-on moment, their run-on song, while the band's playing the school song and they're running onto the field. Certainly can help add to that energy. Other areas, some are necessarily always used on a game day, perhaps pre-game, but extending systems into less common areas, can let staff save their voices for the field. Let's give them a microphone and a simple overhead in ceiling speaker system. uh, they might have uses during, intermission, reviewing real-time film, with the team, for their second half strategy. Uh, these rooms also benefit, if you're the type of facility that's host, regional tournament, type events where you've got a bunch of teams coming in. The ones that come to mind most often to me are track and field events where you might attract 20 different schools. And every corner and nook and cranny, every team wants to have their space, and their place to, do their event preparation. And these auxiliary spaces, having them connected to the main sound system can help keep, all these various, teams and participants, informed of the event progression also, and make just for an overall smoother event. Again, we need to make these systems, easy to use, addressable by, central control points. So we could decide, if there's a PA announcer feed going there, or maybe a more specialized feed covering these areas. But, either way, systems away from the playing surface should have a planned, consistent use and idea for, program content, if any. Say being able to route, even something as simple as the main PA announcer, to all locations at a push of a button is very beneficial, and keeps not only staff but also our participants in the know as long as possible. Yep. Gym workout areas, warm up areas, cool down areas. Uh, these areas, well, they might not be, in use, during the game. There's no reason if they're on the same plot of land as the arena or stadium that they're not connected to these centralized systems. It's no secret that music is a great workout motivator. I think we've all got our playlists and such that we, jog with, or, whatever may be. Let's make sure you know, make sure our athletes, have access to those, through a simple Bluetooth connection, something, within these spaces. Or maybe these spaces, the coach or the head of the training staff wants to be able to activate a microphone in there and, motivate the team, during their workout, or tell them, to switch stations. These areas, it is beneficial, having these systems in areas that may not be game day systems, but they're certainly, part of the larger, venue system. And again, being able to manage these systems, let's make sure that we have some sort of security, so not just anybody can tap into these and start having their own dance party. Many easy ways to manage these systems and only allow authorized users access to them, and their functions. Look, kind of leaning towards larger programs now. We have, press and dining areas, uh, media work areas. And if I know for a fact that if food's provided, you'll find the press here until it's gone or until the game starts. Again, generally found in larger facilities, higher ed venues. There are usually no music zones, necessary information only. They benefit from a simple controllable sound source feed, which enables them to be engaged, pre-event, post-event, or at halftime, or when out of the press box. Perhaps your press box, has a stats person that just reads stats, whether it be starting lineups, or recap of last play or whatever. That's all you really want in these areas. Your real pertinent info. If it's football, referee mic. But they don't really need the music content. They don't really care what song the band's playing, or the cheer squad's dancing to right now. So we want to provide some special attention to these spaces and make sure they only get the info that they really need. It's very common, in larger high schools, and certainly when we get to collegiate level, to have, a press conference area, or at least an area that's designated as, yes, this is where coach and player interviews are going to be after the game, whether it's just voice interviews with, you know, you know, something simple, or if, you have a larger program and you've got, the full media onslaught showing up. Let's make sure these areas can operate independently, from the main system, and only carry the very pertinent information, such as that I just described for press areas. These are also a great area to reinforce your school's branding, with backgrounds and such, for your teams in these spaces. It's very, very common. These areas, will just have, overhead ceiling speakers, nothing complicated. That's usually adequate. Other things you could do, to increase your engagement with the press is, have a press mult for the local media to take direct microphone feeds to their cameras or whatever they might be bringing in with them. And these areas, again, they can, they can double, pull double duty as other sorts of flex spaces too. It just, depends on your facility.
Dave, if I'm a program that streams my games, is there a way to sort of bring that stadium experience closer to a remote audience?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something it's been quite popular. I mean, from high school on, on up, if you don't have the national TV, you know, broadcast there every week, streams or webcasts, whatever you want to call them, of your events. Uh, they can be anything from simple with one person just announcing the play-by-play, and with the addition of just a minimal amount of gear, though, we could start to mix in some of the stadium aspects. One way to do it, okay, we just hang a microphone out the window and it sort of picks up what's coming out of the main sound system, and folks at home or remote that are consuming that content, it's good enough for them. If you want to step it up a notch and really, start extending that immersive experience to remote viewers, uh, putting let's get a microphone in front of the school band, or two. And let's have somebody, when the team scores, play the fight song or whatever it may be. Let's give that experience to those folks at home also, who are probably used to, experience that in the stadium. Um, if it's football, let's get the referee mic into the stream, if we can. I mean, getting a direct feed from a microphone, whether, that you can use as appropriate. You might take the press announcer, for the starters announcements, and actually take that to your broadcast. The referee mic, when he clicks his mic open, let's let the folks that are viewing from a distance, hear that information clearly, also. So engagements, yeah, we can move outside the stadium with this also relatively easily.
Yeah, yeah, very cool.
Other areas, usually in higher ed at this point, but also in some of the larger football programs, we want to keep our most important fans, boosters, former players, the guy that scored the winning points of the game. And, maybe they have private areas, or there's people circulating in and out during the game, or these folks commiserating, with each other, the good old times. Somewhere, somewhere for them to go. We have various potential levels of audio video support. But again, usually, these areas, if somebody's in there in game, they want to hear the announcer, or perhaps, the radio broadcast, or the streaming broadcast, selectable. These systems, in these smaller spaces, can also function as island systems, outside of game days. Um, we should have the ability, though, to, split off PA announcer, maybe even, larger facilities. Let's let these areas, hear the post game press conference by routing the audio to them at a, simple press of a button. So while it certainly is important to, you know maintain fan engagement. Our fans, our former players, and our day of game staff. It's also important to keep them engaged and immersed in this environment. Also, others that benefit from this, and we see VIP boxes, suites and things of that sort popping up in all sorts of venue sizes. And again, we want to keep our most important dedicated fans engaged in their premium areas and their restrooms. If they're out of sight of the field because the suite is that deep, let's make sure they can still hear the PA announcer or the referee, and give them a local volume control because maybe they don't want to hear any of it. Um, some suites have openable, windows that can be opened or doors that can be slid open. But again, you get into these cold weather areas, or when the weather is inclement, well, maybe they want to close those doors and windows, and now they're isolated from what they may have been hearing from the main sound system. So even the simplest, one or two small ceiling speakers and a wall volume control, and appropriately routed, by the system content, depending on what point of the game we're in, help keep them, engaged no matter where they are within the space. We also have just other spaces in the building that are sometimes, dedicated spaces. Sometimes they might double as the press area and the dining area. I mean, they change function, as the event progresses. Some of them might have video support. If you have video capabilities, certainly, fan that out, within these areas that, may be just for, game day working staff only, or for the press. And these systems, can also serve other non-game day functions, for, staff meetings or whatever. And these spaces aren't necessarily small seated spaces, in a high school, environment or something like that. Maybe it's an auxiliary gym, the ability to, provide, the main system, audio to an auxiliary area can be very beneficial. Thinking outside of sports, perhaps use these systems during commencements, to, spread audio further because you have overflow seating. So multifunction spaces, can are, often monetizable spaces for a wide range of possible uses. Recruiting rooms, they're more often used outside of game days. They can sometimes also, double as alumni or VIP spaces. But we see, more and more, designs for these spaces, even simple systems with simple AV playback systems. Maybe they have some content that the team's developed, past victories or big moments, of the school. Again, let the content, creative team reinforce the messaging of the school and the school's branding within these spaces. Uh, AV play, again, creating content for these spaces. Just having speakers isn't enough. We need content for these spaces. So let's look to reinforce our messaging, reinforce our brand, and immerse people at every point, through an event journey that they may be on. There's also a wide range of other areas that benefit, from event engagement. Some are public, some are not, but we want to keep our game day staff and employees informed because they're just as important as the patrons. I could go on and on about this. You see the list, but these people, all benefit on game days or even non-game days from being engaged with the event, so that they know what's going on. Implementing biamps, integrated solutions, featuring premium loudspeakers, networked amplifiers, and advanced, digital signal processing technology, creates an immediate and tangible improvement across athletic facilities. Coaches experience clearer communication in training rooms and other spaces. Concession areas benefit from improved ambience that enhances a customer experience and maintains engagement. and emergency messaging becomes readily consistent, throughout the entire complex, which is just, unfortunately, really important these days. To make all this happen, we do need to choose, a contractor, who has access, preferably to, the BIAMP ecosystem of equipment. And with that, that access to equipment comes, access to the support of, our team, both pre and post sale.
Great. We've talked a lot about in the presentation here about back of house systems. Anything you want to add just generally about game day operation of the main sound system? Any concerns around that? Maintenance, anything like that?
Yeah, I could go on for a little while about, but yeah, you know, the main show around the floor. I mean, it's a lot of the themes, that I've talked about before. You know, you know, audio video systems and lighting systems are, can be used as tools. And they can be used as tools to, enhance our brand, enhance the event. Um, I suppose, some of the main things that I strive for in my operating of sound systems is number one, don't let it hurt. Uh, don't start out with the volume on 11 because you have nowhere to go. It needs to be loud enough for the moment. When fans are walking in, that's, if we're playing, if we're actually doing music playback, assuming we have somebody playing back appropriate music, or a playlist, um, let's keep that volume down so fans can communicate, with each other, commiserate with each other. Uh, let's use a sound system to create excitement. Yeah, when it's time for the team to run on, all right, the level of the sound system comes up. Well, the opening introductions are on, but then, after that moment, probably bringing the level back, down to the system. We don't just want to run the system on 11 all the time because that's just not making good use of its, of the of its capabilities. Um, a properly maintained system. I mean, whether you're a large organization and you have on-site AV staff, consistent, care and feeding and just checking, walk around, listen to all the speakers. Is this zone too loud? Is this zone, is this, zone a little bit quieter? Is the streaming feed that's being provided this week, or the radio feed, is the engineer sending it, much quieter than the guy last week? Maybe we need to adjust those concession areas or the concourse areas, the volume of those spaces. But having the system properly commissioned by, your installation contractor or your qualified staff, and having balanced audio levels throughout a facility. When I say balanced, that also means appropriate levels for the areas, is really key to people having, an enjoyable and engaging experience.
Sure.
So when considering an audio system upgrade for a facility, it's important to engage with a competent contractor, as experience in sports facilities. Ideally, they'll have some local or regional installation references you can visit to hear and see their work. Um, as I've mentioned a couple times, that word commissioning, in medium to large scale systems where you have multiple zones of audio. And when I say zones, I'm talking all these various areas we've talked about that are add-ons to the main system we may push audio to. We want to have the system levels balanced and provide presets, for the audio routing that are appropriate for the different, phases, of an event, from walk-in to in-game to halftime to post-game. Um, Continuity of fan experience, provides, immersion that will keep them coming back time and time again. So each space, from concessions to training rooms, contributes to the overall experience. Audio quality and fan engagement, shouldn't drop off when someone steps away from their seats. The comprehensive approach, eliminates, the fragmented audio systems that plague, many facilities. You don't want to be running from, one part of the facility to the other to be changing the program content, which is why a centralized control system is highly beneficial to creating the immersive experience, for our patrons. By implementing a single integrated solution across their entire complex, athletic directors, benefit from seamless coverage, from playing fields to concourses to locker rooms, training facilities, concession areas. Centralized control allows staff to easily manage these systems from a single interface. Consistent of, and affordable, quality that maintains clarity, whether you're delivering play-by-play, pregame instructions, emergency announcements, or music to enhance the event are key. Having a scalable architecture, you're not pigeonholed, if you're just starting and you're building up to this. Sometimes you just don't do it all at once, but let's choose an architecture like in the BIAMP ecosystem that can grow with your facility's needs and budget. And again, sticking with one unified ecosystem, a single manufacturer greatly simplifies installation support and growth, over time. And BIAMP would love to be your partner on this, journey. We can offer complete integrated audio solutions, but we don't just provide equipment. We provide expertise. My team alone has over 100 years of design experience in sports facilities. Our teams work directly with athletic directors to understand the specific needs for each space within your complex. And when we talk all that out, the result is audio solutions precisely tailored to your facility's unique requirements and budget constraints. As athletic director, athletics programs continue evolving, BIAMP remains committed to enhancing every aspect of the game day experience, from the first announcement to the final buzzer and everywhere in between. Thank you very much. Were there any other questions you saw come in, Andy?
No, I think that about does it. Very interesting stuff, Dave. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be paying attention at the next sporting event I attend and see if they're conscious of all of the information you just laid down. Thank you to everybody who attended today, and you'll be getting a follow-up email with a link to the archive of the presentation and contact information for BIAMP if you want to follow up with Dave and have any questions. His email is right there on the slide and in that email. So thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.